Okay, now that we're back. Sorry about that. Battery died. Now we're in setups. This is where you can fine tune your individual banks to fit your specific needs. Uh, and our developer in Corrado and them, they made some really cool changes to this layout for these steps because it used to be they had their own page. Now you have all three of your setups on the same page. So it helps to compare what each bank is without flipping from one page to the next. I find it personally more useful. Like for me, my expos are default is 20. I raise mine to 30. Um, Add a little bit of pitch pump. That's how hard. Like when you stop, that it'll give a little bit more of a added degree to like kind of make your stops pop real hard. Uh, Pitch pump kind of helps you if you're trying to smack the helicopter. It helps to make those stops a lot harder. So I just add a little bit. That's personal preference. Tail dynamic. Once upon a time, this was set to 50 as a default. Now it's 6. I would highly recommend leaving it where it is, trying to fly it. This will kind of the commands given on changes to the tail will be harder or softer depending on what this value is. If you put it at 50 now and you're flying a torque tube, the odds are you're going to strip the gears right out. A belt is a lot more forgiving, but even now, like on my max, I fly it at 6 and my tail stops and reversals are like spot on. The individual tail, you can adjust the PID loop and the pitch and cyclic pre-comp and your tail rotational rate, speed, and between bank 1, 2, and 3. Like I was saying earlier, if I was to have selected back here in basic, if I would have selected clockwise or counterclockwise, you could come over here to tail, and these pitch pre-comp and cyclic pre-comp for the tail PID loop have values written in these. Right now they're at 0 because I don't have them enabled. I don't need it. It depends on how your setup is, head speed and all that, as to whether you would need it. For the most part, my PID loop on my tails are all default. The only thing I change is I select Hardcore 3D and then I raise my tail rotational speed. I think default is 480 for Hardcore 3D or 460, I can't remember which. I prefer to fly it at 560. What that is if I hold max deflection, my tail will rotate 560 degrees for every second. That's what that's saying. And so that will help you to understand what that means. Same with the cyclic. I pretty much leave my PID loops alone unless I'm seeing like a shimmy or something on stops. Then I might raise the D gain a hair, something like that to soften it up. My rotational speed, that's another thing. It's either 400 or 420 for Hardcore 3D at default. I set mine to 460, and whatever you do on the aileron for the rotation, whatever you do on the aileron axis for the rotational speed rate, I highly recommend copying it on the elevator, because they split it so that you could adjust the PID loops for both, but also you have to adjust the speed, the roll rate speeds for both. I guess some folks out there may like one axis to roll faster than the other. I prefer mine to be equal. It's just easier to control. The tail drag pre-compensation, this is a neat one that we added here about a year ago. What this does is, say you're pirouetting and you're doing piro pitch pumps. The only thing I can know to describe it. If you turn this off or set it to 0 and you're doing pirouettes and you pitch pump at the same time, if you watch the disc in the helicopter and see it doing like a something like that, like a kind of like a porpoise type, and where the disc just isn't flat while you're doing everything, if you lower this value a little bit, -6 seems to be the magic number. That seems to get this action to stop and just make it just solid. It makes the transitions real clean too whenever you're flying. It's just a really neat parameter. They gave us adjustability too that helps a lot to make everything just flow and look more clean. I think if you haven't ever adjusted that or attempted it, I would highly recommend trying it. -6 to -8 would be about the max that I would personally recommend anybody going. Right here in the governor and the level mode, this is where you would select to enable the governor bailout if you want to use it. I prefer to fly with the bailout enabled on all of my banks and just flip from bank 1 to bank 2 to reset it when needed. That's my personal preference. And also you can adjust the auto level gain, the rescue pitch max, and the pitch duration. I didn't explain this earlier, but let me go into it and explain a little bit real quick. The maximum angle, that is whenever you have auto level set up, no matter what kind of command you give the cyclic stick, the maximum it's going to allow the helicopter to pitch or whatever it's going to be 45 degrees if it's at default. You can raise or decrease this value. If you decrease it, then it's going to let it bank even less. So say you want to fly around in auto level mode, just be aware that whatever you have this set, that's what's going to limit you to what you can do as far as how far off of level you can get. Auto level gain, that is when you hit the trigger to rescue, that is how hard it tries to get to that level. You know, higher gain, it's going to try to get there and hold it tighter, but it might cause a shimmy. Lower gain, it might not get quite there, but think it is. It might be off at a slight angle or something. The rescue pitch, that is how much pitch that it gives to climb up whenever you've triggered rescue mode. You just have to kind of play with it. I think I got mine set at default 75. It might be 65. I can't remember, but that's how quick it gets you away from the ground, basically. And the rescue pitch duration, that's how long rescue stays active, which is the part of it that makes it climb. So say you have it on a bank switch and you trigger it, you're going to rescue and climb for 0.6 seconds, and then it's going to slowly give you back collective pitch command to your radio. But as long as that bank stays active, if you have it in a bank mode, auto level is going to stay on until you trigger out of it. So just keep that in mind. That's why I personally I use it as a tool to help me to learn with. So I put it on a momentary switch to just get me out of trouble if I'm trying something new and I get into a pickle, basically. But I can see too where a newer, inexperienced pilot, where this would be highly desired to just gain a sense of comfort and some confidence with their helicopter, with learning how to fly in general. So one other thing too that I need to touch on that is very critical. No matter if you're learning to fly and this is day one or what have you, when you spool up on the ground, you need to have auto level and rescue both disabled. You have to get off of the ground first. The reason being is because with the skids on the ground, you have ground interference. And if you notice a helicopter, when they're hovering, they don't hover like this. They hover against the torque slightly. So, and with the new system, it's constantly recalibrating itself and teaching itself what level is. So if it's teaching itself what level is sitting, because it's triggered while on the ground, and then you go to lift off, it's not going to fly right. It's best to get up into a hover and then hit your auto level mode if you choose to fly on auto level. That way it has time to calibrate itself off the ground when it's in that hovering state, and it knows where its level position really is. If you do it on the ground, it seems to me like you would just be asking for trouble. So there's kind of the basics of all the firmware changes we've made that kind of covers the mini brains and the conventional brains and the micro brains. So now let's get into some cool stuff. This is the stuff that everybody's just having a chance to get their hands on. Which is we're gonna go into counters first, which I believe the regular brain has this as well. You can change the name of these so you can select what you want to see. I got it on main belt right now, but say I want to do my tail belt or what have you, just select it, and then I can go back in, or fuel filter if it's a nitro, the muffler if it's a nitro, whatever, or none at all. But then you select it, identify which you want these four to be, and then you can reset any of these. Like I got 3 hours and 36 minutes 35 seconds on the belt, tail, head dampeners, thrust bearings, and this unit has a total of about 7 hours of flight time on it right now. 109 flights. This is my newest of the mini brains. But the only thing that will not reset is this main flight count. That is now something that cannot be reset by the user, and it's so that MSH can see should you mail it back and somebody say, oh, I just got it and only flew it once, and in reality there's 10,000 flights on it.